get people standing up.
Well, I know, that's what.
And good evening. This is the June 11th meeting of the Stow Board of Selectmen. I'll call this meeting to order. As usual, I want to begin with public input on anything that is not on the agenda. Okay, seeing and hearing none, I will go to Chairman's comments. Just so everybody knows, we're having an unusual full house. I think I kind of have to do, the planning board has a meeting tonight, right? And an agenda? All right, so I kind of have to go to our first substantive thing. I kind of have to go to the Lower Village update, which anyone's free to stay around for. Then I'm going to ask whoever's here on the Oars liquor license if we can postpone that in a minute, and then I'm going to go to the event for Mr. Sauta. That's my schedule of events right now. Okay. Chairman's comments. Just a couple of things. I just want to remind everyone that we're not done with town meeting. That's what we'll be talking to the planning board about. The third session of this annual town meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 24th, 2019. I assume starting at 7 p.m. at our usual meeting spot of Hale School. And the main item on the agenda will be revisions to the Lower Village project, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. And there will be a public forum on that topic on, I think, June 20th. Correct? Planning board members? Yes, I'm seeing nods. So, and at our next meeting, we'll be doing annual appointments and reappointments to committees, boards, and commissions. Most, if not all, people who are on committees, boards, and commissions and are appointed by the selectmen should have gotten an email by now, or will shortly, from the selectmen's office asking you if you want to re-up. It's really important to respond to that in a timely manner. Just a simple reply of yes, I do, or no, I don't is good enough. That helps our next meeting go smoothly. And there are openings right now on the Open Space and Recreation Committee, the Cultural Council, and the Historical Commission. If you're interested in any of those spots, please contact the Selectmen's office. And also I wanted to mention that we've been talking about parking at the South Acton train station the past couple of meetings. The town of Acton has a couple of lots that it leases, and it decides who gets those lease spaces on a lottery basis. They do a lottery every year. There is information about these lotteries on the town of Acton's website under parking. Both lots are available to out-of-towners, people who don't live in Acton, to get leases to participate in the lottery. And Acton conducts these lotteries in July and August. Now, we're going to be putting some information up on the Stow town website about this, but I'm going to be mentioning this at every selectmen's meeting between, well, probably now until the end of the summer, to make sure that people in town know that they have that possibility. All right, thank you. I want to go, because I think we can do it briefly, to our minutes. We have two sets of minutes. Thank you, Maureen. And our first set of minutes is from our last meeting of May 15th, 2019. Do we have any comments? We started, well, this was a very brief reorganizational meeting. Anybody have any comments?
Move to accept the minutes of May 15, 2019 as we may amend.
Second. Motion made and seconded to accept these minutes as we may amend. Mr. Ryan.
Under annual board reorganization, I think would might be better than must. Execute the annual reorganization. I don't think it must. And then I don't care one way or the other. And the other part is I think it's going to be, the old respectfully submitted at the bottom. You know where I'm talking about that?
The would occurs, the must is in the first line. Mr. Salvi announced that the board must execute its annual reorganization. Mr. Ryan suggested would. And what about respectfully submitted? That's how it's.
Usually they're signed off by some.
It is on my copy
Oh,
on the
is
next
it?
page. Double-sided pen? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so just one
Yep,
edit,
sorry.
changing must to would. Anything else? Forgive me if I'm trying to rush through this, but I'm trying to rush through it. Seeing and hearing none, no further discussion. All those in favor of the minutes as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Ms. Krisha? No? You were there, okay. Now we're a little behind. We've got a couple of ones that just didn't get done for some reason. February 13th, 2018. I have one comment. On the first page, there is a paragraph, Maureen, that begins later in the meeting, resident Richard Reynolds. That should be moved to the point in the meeting when it actually occurred. You put it up by the hearing that he was trying to talk about, but the minutes should reflect what actually happened at the meeting. Any further comments?
Other than I thought that we were trying to forget this dark period of Stow history, I move to accept the minutes of February 13, 2018 as amended.
Second. Motion made and seconded to accept the minutes of February 13, 2018 as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions?
Actually, I'll abstain.
And Courtney abstains. Thank you. All right. Did my colleagues see anything in correspondence that they want to put on a future agenda? Seeing, hearing nothing. Finally, we are up to the update on the Lower Village project. And I thought I saw Jesse. There he is. Hi there. Now, I'm assuming that Mr. Stedman is going to start us off on this. Is that correct? So we're pleased to have just about the whole planning board here, I think. I think I saw just about everybody. And the planner and assistant planner. Whoever would like to, please join us here at the table. I thought we would start off with a brief overview. You've given us a memo. You want to cover that. Sure. And then we'll open it all over to questions, I think first from the board, but then also members of the public. And I'm going to try to keep us, I don't know what kind of time constraints you've got. I'm going to try to keep this to 15 to 20 minutes, although it deserves as much discussion as we can give it. I think, all things considered, I got to do that.
Okay.
Jesse?
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask, I think Sue Carter is somewhere here, our consulting engineer. There's an extra chair that would benefit from her sitting in it.
Thank you.
Hi. We met once before.
Yep. I'm Sue Carter.
Good to see
Nice to
you.
meet you.
Tom Ryan?
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
All right.
Anybody wants business cards? I've got some.
I think we know how to find you.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. I'll get right to it. So yeah, the purpose of this evening was really to try to get the Board of Selectmen an update on what's been the process for the design review on this project, really since March, but obviously kicked into high gear right around town meeting time and certainly through now. So the original intent, and you can redirect us as necessary based on what you're interested in hearing, was to kind of talk about some of the primary design features that we have, as a group, looked over. So the first thing I wanted to do was just describe how this is different from the first time around and who has been involved mostly. And so since, actually before March, since kind of the tail end of the previous, working with the previous designer, myself and members of a working group that have been helping me kind of answer important questions as I report back to the planning board on this, was with our chair, Lori Clark, former selectman Ingeborg Hedgeman Clark, Craig Martin, our highway superintendent, myself, and most recently in March when we hired Green International, we also had some funds and we hired Sue as well to be kind of our peer reviewing engineer to make sure that any of the technical stuff wasn't getting by us. So we hadn't worked with Sue in the past, so this has been a huge help as we kind of are dealing with a lot of technical aspects of the engineering. So since that time, since we last met at town meeting on just a few weeks ago now, June 3rd, Green International was able to provide ET&L with a draft pricing set. So essentially what this was like a 90% set of plans so that they could have some idea of what the universe of changes was going to look like, and they could begin to price things up and make this entire approach of splitting town meeting up doable. So as we've been finalizing the plans, obviously they had to get an update, and that was just yesterday. So we've been keeping ETL in the loop as much as we can, so that they're aware of kind of what's going on, what the final project will look like, and they can give us a number in time for town meeting. Go. What's up? Okay. As far as the design approach, I just wanted to go over kind of 4 big areas. I'm just going to hit them quickly, and if you have more questions, that's great. I might point to Sue as well to kind of look at some details. But as far as the design approach went, the majority of the updates to this project were, of course, regarding the drainage, the paving, and a few other design features. So regarding the design approach, back in May when Green International, our engineer, gave us the first design, they thought that we would need an additional 9 catch basins, so an additional 9 structures. And the whole purpose of that was basically to reduce the amount of ponding that got into the center of the roadway. So how do you get the water off the roadway as quickly as possible, meeting the Mass DOT standard, which was our goal at the outset here. And so they proposed these 9 different structures. The working group, myself, Sue, everybody else, turned over as many rocks as we could with Green to try to figure out how can we reduce that number. Can you potentially add more pavement and try to push the water more quickly to the existing catch basins? Can you do a variety of different things? And we had them run some of those alternatives, and they did find that, when they looked at the analysis, some of the cost savings were somewhat of a wash when you added in cost increases, for instance, in paving. So we went through that kind of analysis, and we took that same kind of thinking and just went down the line with each major component of the project. So we talked about the infiltration basin expansion. So this is a system that's underneath the common. You can't see it now, but underneath there is a chamber system that basically is meant to store excess stormwater. When the project first got going, we didn't have any test pits on this. So what we found later on, what we know now is that basin was not sized correctly to meet the stormwater standards that we were aiming to meet. So we know now that that basin is going to have to be larger. We're still kind of working out exactly how much larger, because that actually has a big impact in cost, and we're trying to figure out, are there other options rather than just increasing it, and how would it increase? So that's at the moment, something still under discussion, but this was an alternative to literally pulling out the initial drainage trunk line that was installed last year and having all the same impacts to traffic. The idea of taking that all back up again, you can imagine the work that went involved getting it underground. Not to mention, to make the fix, you would have to expand the project limits down further towards the Malone driveway, where the eventual outfall is. So really all eyes were on how can we figure out the issue of storing some of this stormwater and getting us to that standard using the existing system we have in place, and can we expand that? It's turned out to be, even though it's not cheap, it was a more cost-effective option. And then as far as the paving design itself, it's no secret there was a lot of back and forth in terms of the milling and the leveling course last year. It was one of the reasons why we decided that we didn't feel confident that it could be figured out in the time that we had left in November. So what we had now is different. We have a GPS survey of the entire corridor, so Green is already working with data that wasn't available the first time around. But they've also kind of provided and talked with ETL along the way to really understand what were the issues that were driving the cost overruns the first time around. And we found out that it was an interplay of a lot of different things. Not only was it insufficient data, but it was also the way that the equipment that this paving sub had, and the way that it was being used, and the way that the project was literally designed. And so we were able to work with ETL and try to provide them with a couple of different concept plans so that they could better understand what it was that was being proposed and the type of equipment that would be needed. They even changed some of the way that the quantities were listed in the actual work, so that we weren't asking for something very complicated and getting a high price for it. Instead, we could break out several different paving quantities and be able to get priced according to the simplicity of that work. So a lot of nuts and bolts things, but meant to kind of take a common sense approach to shave off costs and expectations where we could. Another big thing that's come up is this, the White Pond Road redesign area. Obviously, we've heard from everybody from bus drivers to commercial truck drivers that the spot at White Pond Road, whether it was the turn radius or the entrance or the exit there, wasn't designed correctly. So we just went back to that. We made sure that the curb radius met all of the standards there, and that typical box trucks, straight trucks could be able to take that turn without having to encroach into any oncoming traffic in either direction. And what Green actually found was that the issue that people were having there, where traffic was getting backed up and people couldn't make the turns, was not so much with the radius of the curve itself, but was that White Pond Road narrowed significantly as you got in there. So they have, they've actually proposed widening it slightly to try to avoid that. So I'm not going to go into every single abutting property, but there's no question that a big reason why it's been important for us to keep this thing moving is because there's a lot of abutter impacts along the corridor. And so we, with Green, reached out to each of the abutters that had had issues the first time around, and unresolved issues at that. And we've since met with them, sat down with them, tried to better understand what they were, and then think about how this plan was going to potentially improve the situation or change something that allowed us to make more of an improvement. And I feel like we've come a long way on that. Can I say that everybody is 110% satisfied? Probably not, but we've come a long way, and we're still working on the details there. So there were several properties that had impacts. I've recently reached out to everybody to show them the updated plans. I think we'll likely have another meeting kind of working out details. I'm happy to go into detail on the abutting properties, but that's kind of, I wanted to just hit on the kind of the big ticket items.
I think one major thing we need to hear, and maybe it's from Sue, the numbers have shifted, the numbers have changed a lot recently and before that. Leaving aside whether the current number, what we all think of that, how likely is it that the number's going to continue to shift? I mean, are we there? Have we thought of everything? Unfair question, I know, and put all the qualifications you want in your answer, but I have to ask the question.
From all the working meetings we've had, I think we've anticipated as much as you possibly can. You never can anticipate everything because you're digging below the surface of the ground and you can always have surprises. I think that everybody's taken a very comprehensive approach and have tapped into everyone's working knowledge, whether it was ET&L's knowledge or Mike Clayton's long-term knowledge of what did or didn't happen in that corridor. So I think we've been able to anticipate pretty much as you can until you actually start digging into the ground. In terms of cost overruns and quantities, I think Green has been very conscientious of being aware that quantities were a concern. The way the original bid was, it was a unit price per listed item, and that's where Green has helped us break it out, some of like the paving costs, into smaller increments so that, as Jesse said, the more complicated items are not lumped together with the simple items, so that it's clear that we can get the best price for the town.
I think one thing I would add to that is the detail that this has gone into
Yes.
is night and day from the first time. I think Sue can.
And then some.
So, as much as Sue's saying, we've uncovered as much as you physically can, know that, and it's at a completely different level of detail.
So my concern, the question I want to ask, and then I want to open it up to the board, and feel free to tell me if this is an unfair question, and feel free for anybody to ask it. So I got used to the idea that there were drainage problems that we didn't know about prior to mid-April. And now in the latest, I see tests done that revealed clay where we didn't know it was, requiring an extension of the distribution field. Something that requires deep milling, I may not be using the right phrases, deep milling as opposed to mill and overlay. I see things of this nature. On the one hand, I think I heard from town meeting, spend what you gotta spend to do it right and sue the people who made the mistakes. But on the other hand, we need to be confident that the numbers are no longer going to change. So have we done all the tests of the nature that need to be done? The clay, the thing that reveals where you need to do a deep milling as opposed to an overlay, that kind of thing. Does that even make sense?
does. We've done, there's still, have they done the test holes?
So, yep, Mike, the highway department is still gonna do a few test pits. Not so much to try to find something they didn't find before, but to just make sure they know exactly where an electrical duct bank from Horizons is under the road, so that the design that they have, they know that they can construct. So there's some slight variability there, but it's really more of a, do we need to shift it on the plan rather than do we need a new approach?
I want to open it up to members of the board. Thank you. Mr. Burke.
First off, I want to thank everyone for all the hard work that they're doing, especially in such a short period of time. I greatly appreciate the planning departments reaching out to the abutters. I think that was critical. And in this memo that you gave us last week, it's clear that you're making every effort in that regard. And from what I understand tonight, you're looking to do even more in that regard. I don't think that this is a proper meeting, especially with the attendance, to delve too deeply into the memo. I have just two questions. The first question, the memo and your project update. The first question is, do you plan to have another public forum?
Yes, it's scheduled for Thursday, the 20th, 7 PM at Pompo.
Great, thank you. And you'll have a chance, and will Green be there?
Green will be there, Sue will be there, members of our working group, so hopefully we'll be able to, kind of continue the discussion and know even a little more.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful to the town and also to the board. I'll try to be there. The last question is, do we have a current price tag?
So we had a preliminary estimate provided, and Green right now is in the process of finalizing their final estimate. I had sent one around.
Yes, you said it.
Yeah, the thing that we don't have, and what we're really relying on, is ET&L's cost price up, basically for the change order that this is going to entail. And that's why we have the meeting on the 24th. I think everybody is kind of burnt from relying on estimates from 2017, and so the goal now is to know what this is going to cost.
You said the meeting on the 24th. Did you mean?
Town meeting, I'm sorry.
Town meeting on the 24th. So we're not going to know until then what the exact number is?
I think we'll have an estimate from Green, but I think the feeling is, let's wait and see what ET&L prices up.
And according to your memo, you thought that we'd be, you might be getting an update of the number in this memo, which is $1,229,171.25. You said that there might be an update yesterday.
That was a preliminary estimate. They did send their final one in. My feeling was to wait on getting that out until ET&L could do their bit.
Okay. Mr. Berg, you got that number, that memo with that number. I actually think you should say the number.
Here's what I wouldn't do. ET&L shouldn't have knowledge of what, they should price up based on what they feel the cost is going to be. We shouldn't be revealing what the estimate is to the contractor before they put together a price.
Okay. All right. There's a reason for it.
Could I, just one thing, I've just quickly compared what I got this afternoon on the 11th, comparing it to the last one I believe I had on the cost estimate on the 4th. And I don't know that I've missed it, but it's not clear to me that I did. There is a substantive difference between the two in one item. One called infiltration chamber, which didn't show up on the last one.
Okay.
So that is the kind of thing that you, and I'm assuming you haven't evaluated the one on the 11th yet, or you have, as a group? Okay. The rest were incremental changes, as I just viewed here, and I'll take a close look tomorrow, but that's a substantive one, obviously with a substantive price tag, so that's
And just so you know, I want to see the drainage counts so I can aggressively review whether or not it's as small as it needs to, as small as we can get it to be and save money, or is it the minimum size already?
So is this a reappearance of an earlier line item for infiltration that the 4th didn't have, but prior ones did, and now it's reappeared? Because infiltration adjustment has been considered for some time. There's no mention on the 4th
Right.
Right. But I have gone back to the earlier ones, but I thought I recall seeing
Yeah.
a cost line item for that. But not on the 4th, and now it's here on the 11th.
So I can answer that. That's helpful. When they gave us the preliminary estimate, they specifically said, we don't yet have the information back from the geotech survey, which was the folks that were doing the test pit, so we don't yet know the soils underneath. So we're gonna leave the infiltration basin out. Given that we had gotten that estimate that Brian was just mentioning, we put it out there anyway with that caveat, and now they have had a chance to look at those soils. They came back with an updated figure of the infiltration basin.
Questions from other selectmen? Tom?
One question I had is, was there on the original, before we dug up everything, was there an infiltration system in there and that we're replacing?
No.
So I suppose one question is I know that, a big part of this is that we were trying to replace the aging infrastructure that was in there. Why would we need one now when we didn't before? Is it just changing code, changing specifications?
Yes, please.
So it's a combination of things. We've done some pavement widening out there, which under current standards means we have to accommodate the additional impervious area. And plus, they were able to go back and they're actually running the calculations to see, is the drainage system, does it have sufficient capacity? We all know that there was, prior to construction, flooding in front of the shopping area. So they went and they did the calculations. Since that, and they came up with the infiltration that they put in and installed. They did not do any test holes prior to that, and they did not submit all the drainage calculations for review despite being hungry for them. So,
We're talking about the first company.
the first company. So the second company has come in and looked at it and said, well, it's not just edge of the road to edge of the road, this driveway drains in, that parking lot comes in. So they did a more comprehensive approach, and that's where they discovered the previous engineer undersized everything.
That covered a 2-year storm, but not a 10-year storm.
Right, and it was surcharging, so that what the new engineer is saying is that if we have a 50-year storm, the whole roadway is gonna be a causeway and will be underwater. And we don't want that, so how can we accommodate the 10-year storm, which is the design storm that Mass DOT standards require? And that's where they said it's a combination of additional catch basins to get the water off the roadway and into the system. But we need additional storage capacity, sort of like a detention pond, where it fills up and slowly drains out. That's what this recharge system is supposed to be doing. It's gonna be dead storage so that we're not surcharging the system so much, but it gets it off the roadway.
Let me ask quickly, Ingeborg, Craig, other members of the working group, are you satisfied with the process that this has gone through?
Speaking from professional engineer level, this is not totally my expertise, but I've been involved with the working group and everything's been very methodical. And this new engineer, Green, is doing a very thorough job, so to this point, I'm personally very satisfied.
So one of the things that I've appreciated in this group, and I have had to miss a couple of the meetings, but that, as Sue and Jesse both alluded to, there's been a real effort to challenge assumptions and look at things to see, do we really need to go this route? Or can we look, just like Sue just said, do we really need to expand that infiltration basin to the extent currently recommended? Or we can be more aggressive about it and try to save some money? Same as Jesse described with the catch basins, the 9, the 8. Could we avoid 9 or 8? But, and then we challenge Green and work with Green on that. So I found that the whole working group also reaches out to other people in town, people that know the roadway or know the history of the project or know how the road was maintained previously, and they're taking all that information in, so there's a real holistic review of, it's not just sort of blinders, it's really, we're seeking information, we're challenging the information we're getting, and I think there's a lot of great analysis being provided to the planning board from the group.
Bill, do you want to add to that?
I don't think this will, I need to take a close look at some of the takeoff ones, like, as you do, and go back and just go through the previous cost estimates and try to tie everything out, and then I'll add the comments to it. But I'm struck by the level of due diligence in this process that wasn't present in the last process, from the engineering perspective of it. And I believe it's value added to have had this working group organized this go-around to facilitate working with, particularly the engineer at this point, but it will also be true when TNL finally gets the plans and specs to put a quote on, which is why it's critical that they do so based only on the plans and specs and not an estimate. So I think it's to our advantage to leave that number out.
Okay. Tom, can you make it quick? 'Cause I am feeling the need to move on.
But Don, have to say.
Just,
Yeah,
yeah, just real quickly, you mentioned the retention pond analogy. Is there any engineering analog to predicting how long, you get this 10-year storm.
Mhm.
It fills your retention basin. Is there some hydrological basis for saying how soon it would be ready for the next 10-year storm?
There is, and that's part of what I want to look at. Typically, you have it drain out within 72 hours or 3 days so that it's dry and ready for the next storm.
Okay.
Obviously, if we have back-to-back 10 and 50-year storms, everything's going to be flooded,
Right,
so.
understand. Okay, thank you.
Just one of the things that I noticed, and I'll leave it light on the cost estimates that I've seen, is that there was a significant amount of granite curbing. Is that new granite curbing? Because I would have thought by now, most of it would have been in, but.
Yep, it's a good question. One of the things that Green does want to do is provide a memo explaining where there could be some cost savings. The original project had a bunch of the curb roundings at all of the driveways as asphalt curbs. At the time when we were working with the MassWorks project, we were trying to fit within that. As we looked at it the second time around, there was a lot of comment about those asphalt curbs are going to get beat up, and they're going to get beat up over and over. So the question is, do we put in the granite now, or do we go back and fix them continuously? That was just part of the discussion. They proposed the granite. There's potential for us to look at that again. It's the drainage and everything functions the same. It's just a question of, do we want to have something that has more longevity?
Bill?
One last comment. Obviously, given the escalation in cost from the very beginning until now, and a significant sum of additional money that will be close to matching what the whole project was intended. Wherever you can find savings, and it may be just putting something off that can be done later, but all of that due diligence, questioning about seeing what we can do, so that when I have to source the money, we become as cost-effective as we can. And I'm sure you think about it.
I suppose my comment to that would be, let's not cheap out and be redoing it 5 times.
No, and I hope I didn't say that, because I didn't apply it.
Yeah.
No, I know that's not your attitude.
And we
Great.
also looked at what's going to be most efficient for the construction season so that it can't be done before winter sets in and we're not having the same discussion a year from now. We are clear to make, and that's part of the really aggressive part that the committee has taken, is we don't want to go out into the travel lane. What other options do we have? We're trying to save money both in police details, interruption to your businesses and traffic, as well as the physical construction costs. So we've been very aggressive in pushing for options to try to avoid those.
Craig has the last word.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Mike Clayton said that the highway department could take care of the loaming and seeding on this particular project, and that might represent $50,000 or somewhere in that range. So that's a significant number, and we can do it with our own forces. Then I think that's beneficial.
So thank you, and thank you to everybody who's been involved, planning board, Sue, everybody on the working group. This has been a lot of work in a very short period of time, very much appreciated. To be respectful of everyone's time, including the people who are here, I think we have to end this maybe a little bit shorter. Again, public forum planned for June 20th, 7 p.m., probably at Pompo. If I could take the liberty of making one suggestion, the new number, whatever it may be, if you could break it out, not the detailed thing that I saw today, which is helpful for an engineer, but not for an ordinary person. Break it out into its categories. X 100,000 for redoing the slope of the road. Y 100,000 for drainage. Z 100,000 for a butter's concerns. White Pond Road. And an English explanation. And I'm envisioning this document being no more than 2 pages long. And I know you can do an English explanation because Sue just gave a great explanation to Tom about the drainage. Something just like that, about why this is necessary. I think many of us who've been closely involved understood the leap up to Green's initial estimate, have a harder time with the additional leap up to the current estimate, but a document like this could help everyone. Okay? You might want to think about that for being available for June 20th. Thank you, everyone.
That's it. I agree. And the reasons why you want to do this stuff, I think would be part of that too.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
In a careful reading of what's been provided already, it might take a little cutting and pasting, but you can get a better sense if you put them together and read through the first reporting. I'm not saying all of each of those, but the reasoning, the rationale, the deficiencies, what caused it. As I look at these line items and some of the takeoff numbers, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's laborious, but in the end, getting a summary of it that compacts and compresses all of it makes sense. But for the selectmen, as you're thinking about it, and others who have gotten these reports, if you go back and, and you can highlight a number of issues, they track pretty much.
So, Sue, I just want to tell you, I know I have the sense you dropped some stuff to help us out on this. Very much appreciated, but you are needed on this, so we really do appreciate it.
I've just blown off 2 other meetings on the 24th. No, not an option.
We'll have
Yeah.
really as much
Yeah.
fun there as you will at our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig Martin.
All right, so, is there somebody here on the Oars liquor license? Hi. May I ask you to just wait for our next item? I have a million people here on that, and I just try to manage the room a little bit. Mr. Sauta.
Fun to watch, too.
Mr. Sauta, you may approach the bench. I may? Yes, you may approach the bench.
All right.
All hands on deck.
Yes, sir. Approach and be recognized.
Great to see you, Jim.
Happy birthday. So this is a momentous occasion and probably long overdue. Have a seat, please. There. God, you're almost 90 years old. Have a seat.
He can still knock you out.
Well, you're always showing.
Give me a little bit of a run for your money, but not.
I still say you could beat me up. I know you could beat me up. So actually, do you want to introduce all the people with you?
My wife Betty,
Beginning with your lovely wife, Betty.
and one of my neighbors at McDonald,
Yes, we met him.
my daughter Lynn,
Hi,
my
Lynn.
husband, my grandson Jamo, and who right in the back. My one granddaughter, my other daughter Paula, and her husband, and James, who's Kayla's husband, and Eileen, who's a neighbor of ours, and my son Thomas.
I did this just to see if you could remember.
That was a test.
You did all right. You did okay. He seems real close, don't you? Well, I feel like we got to put on kind of a show with this kind of crowd. So,
Well, we can do a little dancing.
all right. So, Jim, I want to start off by asking you for just a summary of what it's been like to be in Stow for this long, and a few words of wisdom, and settle some scores, and do whatever else you want to do.
Well, it's been 67 years. We started with that 10-acre farm, which Betty's father owned. And we cut the trees down and made a farm stand and farmed it. Now it's apple fields. And then we moved to Hudson Road with 3 acres of land, which I'm so glad I bought. $14,000. Can you imagine that? 3 acres and a house
$14,000.
$14,000.
I'll give you 15 for it now.
16.
1957, 58, somewhere around there. And the Hudson Road was a dirt road. And where the murder farm is, there was a big cellar hole. And so the drunks would come down on Friday night into the cellar hole, and Pa Ratty would come down with his cruiser, the station wagon, and haul them out and put them in the, bring them to Maine to cool off for the night. We didn't have a jailhouse or anything back then. And we progressed, we had our children, and I retired at age 62 because I wanted to.
But you haven't really retired.
No, he's still on the payroll. He's been driving the COA van for over 20 years.
Well, and on the farm, I mean, he works pretty hard on the farm. That's,
Good for you.
yeah, good for him.
That's his recreation.
Okay.
Hobby.
Yeah, I can't chase Betty around anymore because I get too tired too quick.
Oh, my.
So,
Too much information.
were all the kids born here?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And Lynn, my daughter lives in Switzerland. I've got another grandson that's on his way up now from South Carolina. And they've been there for 30 years. Paula lives right over here on the court.
Yep.
Tom lives down at Gates Lane.
No,
Queen.
Queen.
Queens Lane.
He moved.
Yep.
I didn't even know it.
He's practically Hudson.
So I got them all around me. My granddaughter, Kayla, lives up in Clinton.
And when did you first start getting involved in the town government? That was later.
I think I told you the story a long time about. We were married in 52 and I got discharged in 53, maybe 55, 56. They started their first board, industrial board,
Yep.
to see what we could do. Well, our tax rate was, we pay $75 a year, property tax. 75 bucks a year, unreal. And, but all the guys on the board were farmers. We had,
Sure.
and I won't mention any names, but the reason they formed that because Genrad wanted to move into Stow where ET&L is. And something about Atlantic Industries, whatever they are, research is across the street. They wanted to move in also. Wow, I said, you know, guys, you should sign this up. I said, make the rules. And they were willing to do anything. They said, nobody is touching our land, hallowed land in Stow. So they rejected it. So they built right on the border. You can take one step up the border and you're in their property. And that was back in, I think, 57, 58. So I stayed with them long. There was a couple other small industries that wanted to come in and they just threw them out. And I said, you know, what's the sense of having an industrial board to make the town a better place? And at that time, 495 was just being talked about.
Right. That's what really changed things.
Yeah, 495 was being talked about, and of course, that was about a 5-year project by the time it got done.
Yeah.
And other than that, I got involved with the COA because Betty pushed me into it.
Blame Betty.
Is that true?
Thank you, Betty.
And what's her name? She lived down, her daughter was over at the house yesterday.
Joe Langley.
Joe Langley.
Joe Langley.
Oh, yeah.
She's a distant cousin of mine. And she took me by the head and says, you get down there, they need you. Well, we had a junky old bus. I mean, it was a rattle trap. So we finally talked the town into going to the state and getting a decent bus. And it just expanded from there.
Yeah.
And then I was on the board with Pompo,
Yeah.
the first board.
Which was
the needs committee to see what the needs of the town were.
which was like 7 or 8 years ago. It's hard to believe.
And then Bill came up with the idea of making a community center out of it.
Yep.
And which was great, and it's worked out fine.
Well, you scared him well enough, so I knew I better come up with something.
Well, you know,
I scared you.
You were a good advocate for something that needed to be advocated for.
Well, I just wanted that so bad I could taste it.
Yep,
And,
you got it.
and we got it. And the only thing I hold against it, you don't list who's in that building. Don't want to sign out this as COA, rec department. And
I
I
think
got
I've
walking on the street.
I think I've heard this before.
I should go out a couple
Here we
times.
go.
Right.
But that's how I was still friends, so.
Well, look, I don't wanna monopolize this, but
Why not?
I wanna give the rest of the board a chance, but I have to say, we don't celebrate the 90th birthday of just anyone in town, and other people do achieve it, but it's really a combination of your birthday, a life of working really hard here in Stow, and civic involvement. And that combination is pretty unique. I have to say, personally, I've really enjoyed my interaction with you. You've been fun, you've been challenging, and I know at the end of the day, we're always friends.
No.
And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you.
Other members of the board? Tom?
Well, that's it. I'd say I've probably known Jim about 25 years now. But one of the things that I really, really respect about him is that we don't have to agree, but we can have a great conversation, and as you said, we can part friends. There's not nearly enough of that in the world right now.
There's none of
And,
that.
you know, Jim and I have had a few
We've been-
conversations that we kind of walk away from occasionally, but the thing is, the next time we see each other, you know, and I think we both listen. So he's helped me grow as a person, and, you know, I know that he's listened to me when I've had something to say, and I very much respect the way that you handle yourself, and you are a true gentleman.
Thank you.
Tom?
The words, two words come to mind when I look at you for obvious reason, connection, semper paratus.
Thank you, sir.
It's the, I was in the Coast Guard a while, and well before you, but after you. But I think that the embodiment of the training that you got as a young man with embodying those words, he's always ready, being ready for anything that life throws at you. That's what you were trained to do, and you
And I still
have...
bug my wife because
Cheryl.
Oh, come on.
I said, if we get ready to go sometime, I'm ready to go. If we're supposed to be there, no, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. But no,
Yeah.
let's move it, move it.
But I know I'm very grateful for the service that the knowledge, world, life skills that I
And
got
I was
then.
involved in the greatest rescue in Coast Guard history,
Yeah. And
down off of the Cape. And that was quite an experience.
right. That was the other one the movie was about. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, Lifeboat
Right,
Station,
finest hour.
Chatham, yeah. So I just want to say thank you for everything you've done on behalf
You're-
of,
you're
and for all the
welcome.
veterans too. I know it's near and dear to your heart for
Yeah.
veterans' activities in
Yeah.
town. So
Every-
thank you very much for all.
Every time I go to Bedford, I bring back a bunch of books, and I tell these guys, if you don't want to use it, don't use it, but go down and sign up.
Mm.
That's all you gotta do is sign up, and you'd be surprised at the programs that the VA provides.
Mhm.
Even if you've got money, or if you're poor, or if you're half nuts. They've got a rest home down there, and a soldier's home. That's like the highest quality hotel anywhere. Built-in swimming pools and bowling alleys, and they just renovated. I don't know how many millions they spent down there in Bedford. So I'm a strong advocate of the VA, and I've given a couple of talks when our agent, Mr. Jacobs, was there, and trying to put some of these guys around. And the old school digs in, we don't want to be a burden to anybody. I said, you idiot. I said, you're not a burden. I said, you put your time in, and you've got your hurts.
Mr.
Well,
Burke,
thank you.
you want to add something?
My godson.
Yeah.
I'm
not your godson.
After that.
It
That makes you the godfather.
You're my godfather, I'm not sure I'm your godson. When I was growing up in the lake section of Newton, or near the lake section of Newton, and I would get down there, I heard a term that was used, humani respetati. It means a man in his community who is respected and who gives respect to that community. Jim, besides all the personal guidance and information you've given me about Stow, you have provided our community with so much help in so many areas, and it has earned you so much respect. There isn't anyone in Stow who doesn't respect you. And we're very proud that you've given your time and your commitment to our community, and we are very glad for your respect.
Well, you know I love this town. There's no other town like it in the Commonwealth. That's all I got to say.
Nothing but respect and many happy returns.
Well, thank you.
Amen.
Ms. Fresher, anything you want to add?
Mr. Sauta, I'd like to say that going to town meeting years ago and listening to you speak with the microphone inspired me. I loved going to town meeting, and it's why I've gotten involved in town politics. And thank you.
Some of it rubbed off on somebody, see?
On all of us.
So it is a tradition. Oh, yes, of course, I'm sorry, Bill.
I did want to say that it's uncommon for devotion to purpose that you've had over decades. Many people, many in this room, have donated time for community service in the communities that they're in, but it's uncommon for it to go for decade after decade after decade. That's a devotion to purpose, a single-mindedness that you don't find in people today. And that's a tribute to your character. And the old saying, a person's character is their fate.
That's right.
Your fate is based on that character. And so
Thank you.
I've been pleased to be here for 20-something years.
I remember your first day coming into one of your funny stories.
Always about
Yeah.
doing good.
I didn't mean for it to provoke a memory.
With the town meetings over at the school, at the auditorium and the cafeteria, whatever. And it was his first day on the job. And they had a little ante-room where they had coffee and soda and stuff, and he's standing there and he's visiting. And I says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm the new town administrator." And we meet little voice.
I told you, he's scared.
First day.
And he got up on the stage and the microphone. Nobody could hear him. So he went down. I said, "Mr. Wrigley," I said, "you gotta speak up." I said, "Nobody could hear you." "Oh, I didn't want to be over strong or overbearing on my first day." I said, "Well, they can't know unless they hear you, you know." But after that, I got to know him better, man. He can come right out and.
Yeah.
Well, you cured him.
Well, that story was worth the price of admission. So it's, for those of you from out of town, it's a little tradition for the Stow Board of Selectmen. We, on notable occasions, we do a certificate of appreciation or a little proclamation. I have to thank Phoebe Habercorn of our office, who was very good at writing these. And I want to read the proclamation that has been drafted in your honor. Everybody settle in. This is a bit of a long one. On this 11th day of June, 2019, the Stow Board of Selectmen hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to James Jim Sauta for many years of dedicated service to the town in various capacities, most notably to the Council on Aging. Most recently, Jim served as member and chair of the Pompo Building Committee, and he continues to be a dependable, valuable employee of the COA as van driver and volunteer. Since moving to Stow in 1952, Jim has aptly demonstrated his commitment toward the betterment of the lives of Stow residents. His willingness to give so much of himself to our seniors exemplifies what makes Stow such a special community. Jim's level of dedication is a true benchmark for all of us to follow and live up to. Through the years, Jim personally helped get vans for the COA, but his most remarkable accomplishment was his relentless energy and time trying to find a new home for the COA, which came to fruition at the Pompo City Community Center. On behalf of the entire town, and particularly the senior citizens of Stow, the Board of Selectmen want to thank Jim and wish him a very happy 90th birthday on June 14th, filled with good health, happiness, and enjoyment with family.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke, do I have a motion?
As a liaison to the Council on Aging, having worked with Jim for many years in that role, I move to approve and sign the certificate of appreciation for Jim Sauta that the chair just read for his many years of dedicated service, not just to the Council on Aging, but to this town.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to issue a proclamation in the form just read. Jim, I just want to say thank you for, on a personal level, for all the advice you've given me and all the help you've given me. I look forward to much more.
You know, it's been my pleasure and honor to be a citizen of this town. We've been all over the world, and I can't find another place that I would like to live in and put my roots down in. From San Diego to San Francisco to Seattle to Australia, Hawaii, they're all nice to visit, but there's no place like home.
I think we still got another 20, 30 years in you.
Yeah, and it's been all, wait a minute, we haven't voted yet. We haven't voted yet.
We gotta see if it's gonna be unanimous.
This might be close.
You don't know enough to quit.
You'll celebrate another birthday before.
It's been our honor to have you here. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that was unanimous. Thank you, Jim.
That was it, that was it.
We got a picture, Jim, with you and Jim over there.
Why don't you all sign it, and then we'll do a
You're not
photo.
getting a picture with Bill?
Yeah, actually, Bill, why don't you give it to him? Why don't you give it to him?
Mr. Meek Bill.
After all this.
You can't believe it, I had you out, but you won't be emotional.
So you actually made him what he is now.
Oh,
Single-handedly.
Is that good or bad?
Bill, why don't you move over so the
retires.
clock isn't part of the picture? Just get a plain background.
There you go.
Look up there.
Oh, boy.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's the Jim and Jim Show. All right.
Good job, Jim, thank you.
Boy, this is gonna have to go up in the mantle.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
And thank you to your whole family for coming out. We really
Family
appreciate
and
it.
Council on
friends.
Aging and
Council on Aging.
friends,
Allison, I
everybody's
didn't
here.
give you a chance to say, do you want to throw anything?
Tenacity and perseverance. And anything. It's great having him on our side team, because when Jim's on it, it gets done.
Are you
Thank
scared
you,
of him,
Jim.
Jim?
Absolutely.
There's only one person who's not.
Who's the real boss?
I never denied it.
That's right.
It's pretty clear the fear runs one way.
Happy wife, happy life.
Amen. And Betty, thank you for keeping him in line all these years.
Thank you for letting,
I'll tell you.
thank you for letting him help and
Yeah,
contribute.
and give so much
Well, you
time.
know,
I
right beside you.
appreciate it because he went out of the house.
Truth is out.
She's the brains behind the outfit.
That's what my wife said.
I was gonna say, that sounds like what Kathy
Don't
says.
you have a meeting tonight? Bye. Thank
Go
you.
join some other board.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you all.
Thanks for your father.
Three of
Grandfather.
them came from Switzerland.
Hey, Jim.
It's gonna get empty here real quick.
Congratulations. But you're still a van driver. You still haven't retired from that.
Call me with that.
Thank you.
Julia,
I enjoyed my selection.
I'm sorry.
First one.
We had
We have to go home anyway.
Forgot to tell you on the road.
So next item on our agenda, after that happy event.
Thank you for your patience.
And thank you for your patience, really appreciate it. is a one-day liquor license for Oars for their annual meeting to be held at Pompo. Julia Corona, do you want to tell us what this is all about?
Well, first, I'm the development director at Oars, and Ingeborg is our vice president. And we are holding we have to hold an annual meeting every year, and this year it's really special because we're launching a big project we're working on, which is our river report card. And we want to attract a lot of people from throughout the watershed. So we chose to come to Stow because of your new building, and I live in Stow and I'd like to use it. And so we will be inviting our members, or have already invited members, to come to this for this. It's a business meeting, and then this presentation of our report card, and then a little bit of a social. And at the social, we would like to serve, be able to have with our other refreshments some wine and beer.
Okay.
So
And you said you're tip certified?
I am tip certified and crowd certified,
Okay.
which you don't really need unless you have loud music. But
Right. And so I assume you'll be doing the serving?
yes,
Okay.
I will be right with it. Sometimes I have people helping with things, but they don't keep track. I keep track of the wine and beer.
So later in this meeting, the board is going to be considering some changes to our policy on this sort of thing, but it would be, I think, manifestly, I mean, if we do make some changes, we'll have to deal with who that applies to. It would not be fair to apply to somebody who already applied for the license, so I think, for lack of a better word, we're considering this under the old rules, even if we change the rules. Questions from members of the board?
If I might, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, just real quickly, unless it's a state secret, can you give a real short definition of what is the grade for the river, or is that going to be revealed?
Oh, that's a
at the
secret. It's going to be
event?
revealed. You have to come to the meeting.
Do you want to put in a little plug for Oars, what it is, what it advocates for?
Oars is the
We're on
watershed
TV.
organization for the Assabet, Sudbury, and Concord rivers. And we started out as the Assabet River in 1986 only, and in 2010 we expanded to all three rivers because we figured we could have more impact on the river system. The Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord rivers, sections of it were in 20 years ago this year, were designated wild and scenic. They're the closest rivers to any metropolitan area in the whole country, so they're really special, and we work to protect them.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members of the board? Tom?
Just one question, how many people do you expect at this event?
It's hard to know. Most of these meetings are probably 40 to 60 people.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
move to approve and sign a special one-day liquor license for the Oars annual meeting at the Pompo Community Center on Wednesday, June 26, 2019, from 7 to 9 p.m.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve a special one-day liquor license for Oars annual meeting on June 26th from 7 to 9 p.m. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, that's a good sign. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Have a nice time.
Thank you very much. I hope some of you will join us, and I will send you the information you would like
Okay,
at that time.
thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
We'll look for a press release as well.
We
I'm
do
sure there will
that.
be something.
And if you have extra time on the agenda, we could even do a little presentation for you.
In the future, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
In the future.
Yeah.
I think that would be terrific, actually.
What the report card is and what parameters it included.
Maureen, could we do that in a July meeting? Well, would that be too soon? August?
No, after that's done, we're all prepared to do presentations. And I also, thanks, Stow has supported us over the years for some of the scientific work we do on the rivers that were instrumental in preparing this report card. So
Okay.
we do really appreciate that.
So could we slate it tentatively for one of the meetings in July? And either Julia or Ingeborg will be our contact for that, if that's all right? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
You have an in with the Board of Selectmen here, so.
Yeah, but
You're in
Well,
good
she
stead.
keeps coming back. I mean, she's like,
I know.
she's like the
We
sixth
haven't had
member.
a meeting since she was off the board.
I don't think I'm coming to the next one.
Thank you, let's go.
You will come
We'll
when we
see.
present this.
We'll see.
Yes.
Thank you,
will.
lady.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
contact you about picking this up?
Next item on the agenda is an appointment of an associate member to the zoning board of appeals. So I take it there's only one applicant, and it's gentleman we all know. Thank you. Lenny Golder, and he is applying to be an associate on the ZBA. We all know he's currently an elected member of the planning board. Maureen, correct, the term of this hasn't been defined, so it could either be...
Right, Karen said they hadn't had a chance to talk about that, so she suggested we put him on for the longest term.
Right, which would be 2023?
Whatever's in the motion, I think.
Yes, that's what's in the motion.
Okay, so we just, by way of default, we picked the longest term.
Is Lenny okay with the long sentence?
Probably. I'm gonna guess he is.
Lenny's a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, he wrote a letter applying for it. There is also, Maureen, a full voting member also that's coming up in the pipeline soon.
Okay,
Is that correct?
yes.
I thought there was...
Yes.
Yes.
That will happen.
Because originally, zoning board, they voted to recommend
Right.
this appointment.
So they
And
haven't
at
put-
the time, they were prepared
Yeah.
to make an appointment, a recommendation of a full appointment, but it hadn't cleared posting yet. So I think we'll see that one coming next. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, on the recommendation of the zoning board of appeals, I move that the board of selectmen appoint Leonard Golder as an associate member of the zoning board of appeals to complete an unexpired 5-year term expiring June 30, 2023.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Leonard Golder as an associate member of the zoning board of appeals for an unexpired 5-year term expiring on June 30th, 2023. Further discussion?
Mr.
Yes.
I respectfully submit, I know that Mr. Golder has been a long-time volunteer in town. The zoning board of appeals tends to be a long appointment, not just the term that someone will serve now, but I don't see that there's a lot of turnover there.
There's going to be one shortly.
Let her
This is my
finish.
Okay,
personal,
sorry,
this is my
sorry,
personal
apologize.
opinion.
Apologize.
I do not find Mr. Golder the most inspiring applicant that we could possibly have.
All right. At the moment, he is the only one.
I understand.
Okay. Thank you. Noted. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
I'll abstain.
And abstentions. Okay, thank you. So let's do the annual animal control warrants. Yes, let's do the annual animal control warrant and then the surplus, and then we get to the alcohol policy. You have the materials on the annual warrant now, so the animal control officer is technically a police officer, and to give her the powers that she has, we need to execute a warrant every year, and that's what this is. And you have those materials in your packet.
And those are specified by general law, I believe.
And there's a copy of the general laws that's in here as well, yes. So do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Chapter 140, Section 151A of the Massachusetts General Laws, I move to approve the annual animal control warrant dated June 11, 2019, and effective for 1 year from June 1, 2019 through May 31, 2020, and to authorize the chairman to sign it on behalf of the board.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint, to approve the annual warrant pursuant to Chapter 140, Section 151A, which is issued to Phyllis Tower. Further discussion, Mr. Burke.
Yes, I just would like to, I know Phyllis has been doing a job for us, and just would wonder if the town administrator would like to comment on his thoughts on her reappointment.
That's coming up at the next, that's going to be reviewed at our next meeting, according to the notes we have here.
Then I'll wait for...
This is, the warrant is separate from
Yeah, yes, I
who is to
understand.
carry it out.
But I was just trying to get his thoughts, but I can wait. I'm sure he can too.
I can give them all you'd like.
The contract is I noted as an
It's an
agenda
annual
item for next
contract and it
time.
comes up, yeah.
I'm sorry to rain on your parade.
No, no, Mr. Hodge, I am always grateful for your guidance and correction.
So her contract will be reviewed at our next meeting. But this warrant is issued to her now.
To whoever is the contract holder as of our appointment.
Right.
Next time, yes.
Which happens to be Phyllis. No, I'd like to hear your comments on Phyllis. I think it's appropriate. The warrant's going to Phyllis.
You like it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Phyllis professionally does an excellent job. Before we contracted with Boxborough and Littleton, she was our animal inspector. So we have a working knowledge and relationship with her and have for some time. The contract itself comes up
Next.
annually for review, and I've added some comments to Boxborough with regard, essentially relating to the cost of it and attempting to control costs of the contract. And I'm hopeful that, and there were attempts to change the current terms and conditions that were just given to us cold, and it's somewhat of a surprise from Boxborough. Phyllis isn't the
Right.
contracting agent, she's who we all use for that purpose. And so, managed to get some things walked back for the upcoming year and put some perhaps cost containment provisions and best practices in, from our perspective, to control the costs. And I've discussed this with the Board of Health, because essentially that's the agency from Stow that it controls and directs the actions under this contract. I'm the signatory, but that's the extent of it. So in any event, Phyllis does an excellent job. She's well respected and liked. And I hope what we fixed in for this upcoming year in the which is the nice thing about an annually renewed contract. You know,
Right.
it's stuck for a long time. So at this moment, I'm good.
I just want to comment, if you subscribe to the weekly police reports, we call on the animal control officer frequently. And anytime you share a human resource within our town, you gotta be concerned about responsiveness. I've never heard anything but good things about Phyllis, and I've met her on several occasions, and she's energetic about what she does, and boy, do we use her, or at least so it seems.
So that's one, and there's a cost with that.
Oh, I
And so
bet.
one of the, Boxborough changing from one-third, one-third, one-third of the cost for the three towns, decided it wanted to, we never had a discussion about it, to go to having the contractual costs related directly to the amount of use that each community did. And Stow had the highest amount of use, and therefore it's going from 33% to 42% of the cost.
Okay.
And I said, well, let's have a discussion about that. But one of the things that we need to control, that the others are, is our liberal use to call the animal control officer, particularly when it's outside of the normal working hours, because there's a premium to pay for that. And so that's where we're hopeful to control some costs, because there's a disproportionate number of calls from Stow than the other two communities, and Littleton's almost twice our size. So they've regulated, and that's really our responsibility here, our protocol and best practices about whether, under what circumstances, and what time to call the animal control officer, or tell our residents, you can wait until the morning.
Well, I remember from several years ago that when large animals get out on the streets, Mr. Burke is willing to lend a hand.
Wow, because she doesn't serve in that capacity,
Oh,
so
all right.
that was.
So there's no conflict of interest.
He could still get his call.
Get his lasso out.
I'll call you.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I worked on a ranch once, so I can work with cattle. And I don't know about llamas, but
You mean as a lawyer or as
The best work I ever did.
Anyway,
All
we're good
right,
for that.
so I don't think we actually voted. So on the animal control warrant, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? And that passes. Now, I'm confused by the next item. The next item, thank you, is, Maureen, what is the next item? I don't understand.
Under procurement law, it requires that any items of value need to be disposed of by the governing body or approved to be disposed of. So one of our custodians down at Pompo found a bunch of items in the very crowded back room that everyone agreed would be disposed of. And instead of just finding a dumpster, he was able to put it on a site called Municipid, where everyone who subscribes can online bid on the items. So he raised quite a bit of money that would go back into the general fund. But the law is that the board has to vote to approve of the disposal of the items.
You have to be defined as surplus before you can.
So he just got too enthusiastic and didn't go through the
I'd
formality.
take more enthusiasm than less.
Okay.
Yeah.
And may I assume that what he disposed of, I assume it's a he? Yes, it is a he, I know.
You're gonna hear it in a minute.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move to declare,
But I want some advice. May I assume from that, what we're about to hear, everyone on staff is comfortable calling surplus?
I'm deferring to those who know
He's
firsthand.
very good about email. He has a nice office in the back of Pompo, and so at the end of his shift, doing what he does, he goes back and does a lot of managerial stuff, so he was able to email departments, anyone interested in doors, chairs, and there was no interest.
Okay.
So,
All right,
okay.
I'll take a motion. Oh, and does he know that from now on, he should really ask us first?
Yeah, it was really my fault not to inform him,
That's
so.
all right, okay.
So you know he was getting rid of it.
I kind of did, but sort of, next time
I just
we'll
wanted
watch
to
it.
see what it was.
I couldn't wait.
May I have a
What?
motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to declare as surplus property, town-owned items inventoried and previously sold via the Municipid, this website, by town custodian Jeff Harrell, good guess, which included 2 round tables, large round tables, 1 electric twin bed, 42 heavy wooden fire-rated doors, a rolling metal bread shelf, 49 chairs, 5 pieces of exercise equipment, and a 2008 Ford Econovan with a VIN of 1FT2S34L78DB44609 in accordance with Massachusetts procurement laws.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to declare the items just listed as, that have already been sold as surplus.
How much did we make?
Further discussion, that was my question. Do we know how much we made?
I didn't total it because it was at various times. I can find out.
Could you-
Ballpark it?
Sure.
Ballpark? Do you know a ballpark?
Can't remember what they got for the van. I think the other items might have been $1,000 total.
No, we should applaud his initiative.
Well, and it frees up space in
No,
the undeveloped area down in Pompo.
The bigger lesson here is good, initiative at doing something we need. We need to make a slight modification to the process, that's about
Oh,
all.
and it's better than tossing it into a landfill.
Yep,
Somebody
it is
can
better
use
than that. It is better than that. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Please tell Jeff that we said thank you.
Sure will.
Thank you. Okay, so alcohol on town property, this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I don't have a lot of preconceived notions about how we should wind up, although I did some work on it. But I really want to talk about it, and I'm going to keep in mind that Courtney has not been part of these discussions. So, we issue occasional, as you just saw, one-day liquor licenses. Very often, they're not on town property. They're neighborhood parties or some event somewhere, but sometimes they're on town property. Pompo, library, for fundraisers, things like that. There is this area of law that you saw outlined by town council called social host liability. And you saw town council's recommendation in a nutshell is don't have alcohol on town property. Let me finish.
Yeah, I will, but I just want you to know I've got a question about that.
Okay. And then I did a little bit of research with Maureen's help, talking to the insurance company, and then a very, very informal survey of other towns. I was assuming that a majority of the board isn't going to want no alcohol on town property. I personally would be, I think I'm okay with that. But if we had alcohol on town property, what do our neighbors do? Frankly, nobody does what we currently do, which is a really informal, hey, are you gonna keep an eye on things? Okay, good enough. They all do some combination, at least with larger events, of insurance and a tip-certified server. They have, well, Sudbury says no alcohol, but the other two, Harvard and Boxborough, they try to make some distinction between public and private, or it really is small and large. They try not to bring the hammer down on a tiny event, yet if there's going to be members of the public there, they want it done with a tip-certified server. Town council makes the point, he doesn't even think that protects us from liability, but be that as it may. So that's where we are. Mr. Burke, you had a point to make?
Yeah, I came to this memo late in the process, and for that I apologize if I didn't ask this question earlier, but it's, I'm trying to get a sense here what the town council gave us his counsel on. It says, the town, if any, the town might permit alcohol availability at town-hosted events. And then in the last sentence, he's talking about town-sponsored events on town property. Does this memo include events that are held, such as we just approved a liquor license for today, where it's not a town entity, and this isn't a town-hosted event, it's someone else who's just renting the facility?
I think that's a good question. What he's responding to are the three hypotheticals that I sent him almost a year ago, where the Friends host a wine and cheese reception, an actual town department hosts a holiday party, the fire department, an actual town department, has an award ceremony with a bring your own. I think that's mainly what he's responding to. Then my memo, because I'm trying to summarize the policies of other towns, I'm talking about private entities on town property, which is like the thing we just had.
Yeah.
As well as municipal departments with alcohol on town property. Nobody's talking about licenses for off-town property, though I think we have to someday. Does that make sense?
Licenses for off-town property?
Like if every once in a while the people at
Oh,
100 Acres will have a block party, we'll give them a one-day license, or Collings will get a one-day license, or something like that.
The golf courses do it.
Golf courses
Yeah.
do it. We may have to talk about that, because I've noticed some of the other neighboring towns, they require tip certification there too. But tonight, I didn't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about Pompo, Randall. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess it does, but the answer to my question then is, are we considering a policy that applies to any use of alcohol on town property, or just towns hosted, as the three hypotheticals that are laid out in this memo?
So I'd like to consider any use of alcohol on town property, because I think all of them involve some degree of social host liability. The town-sponsored, town-held, much more direct. But I think the private events,
Such as the one that we just
such as the one
tonight,
we just,
still could expose you to perhaps a lesser, but some degree of
I
liability.
think so. I think so. Just from our property insurance, I don't know. I think so. And it's certainly our neighboring towns have policies that encompass events just like that. And from what I could tell, our neighboring towns with an event like that, they would have required a tip-certified server, which they had, and they would have required some kind of additional rider or insurance naming the town as an additional insured.
Which I saw a cost item of $40 to $50 estimate.
I don't
or
think any of
something
these things are
like
that expensive. Bill?
I believe it's been established that we're exposed to risk, liability risk, irrespective of whether it's our own folks on our own property in the building, or because we're controlling by renting to others. The risk is there. And I'm a firm believer is those that create the risk are to insure the risk. So that's what some of these other communities are doing. You get TIP certified if you're coming in from the outside and carry some insurance. You're creating the risk. So there's never enough insurance coverage. So the risk is one thing and then the coverage is second. And Maya was explaining in their own what that meant for us and our policies. And of course, the overlapping liability insurance from those, without saying it, create the risk should be there as well. And so I agree with that principle.
Right. Right. I just think we're at a point where we got to deal with this in a different way than we are currently dealing with it. How and what that is exactly. Well, I made a recommendation. So let me do Tom and then Courtney.
One of the things I think we need to do a little bit is separate, what we've been doing for a number of years now is we've been using a one-day license basically as an approval, even if it's not sold. I think we need to separate the policies a little bit. If we allow a town group or somebody else to come in and have alcohol there, right? It's one thing. If they're selling it, it's something totally different. I think by mass law, we only need to have the one-day license if we're allowing somebody to sell it.
Yes, but I think what's being discussed here is different than the license. This is about liability.
Right.
So
I'm just saying.
We've been following the statutes with regard to sale of alcohol by getting a license. This is related but completely separate.
Right. But what we've been doing is we've been using the one-day license
as permission.
As permission to do it. So if we put in a different policy, it might be a slightly different form, and I've gone along with it, even though I've always felt funny about, we're not selling any alcohol. Here's a permit to sell alcohol.
I follow what Tom's saying. He understands all this liability stuff. He's just saying that when the Friends are just having an event, or the Firefighters Association is just having an event where alcohol is served but not sold, they don't need a license. They just need our permission if it's on town property.
Right, so you use the term loosely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, I don't think it changes, from my perspective, the nature of what we're talking about.
I agree.
ABCC has certain rules we have to follow, and a one-day liquor license is one of them if there's going to be a sale of alcohol. We can't change that.
Oh,
so we
absolutely.
do that, but it doesn't mean that you wouldn't also want to have an approval by the board, say in this case where there's no sale of alcohol, but there will be alcohol, and therefore the liability is going to be present. So they come before you, and you simply require certain things, as we do in other exercises.
Absolutely.
It's an event that's being held. There's certain things, public safety, liability, like we did with Collins, absent an entertainment license, we got a public safety
agreement
because it was applicable.
Right.
Courtney?
So I have two things now. One is, do we need to make a distinction between the license and a permit? So a permit would be for use of alcohol without selling it, and the license would be to sell it, as I understand the conversation. So that's one question. The second question is, or comment, is that I think it makes sense to make a distinction at a certain group size. So in the discussion previously, there was, for 20 or under, you treat it one way, and for more than a certain number of people, you treat it another way. And partly the reason I think that distinction is important is that just when you have a larger group, it's harder to keep track of how people are doing.
Right.
And whether they're still safe and healthy. And so at a certain point, you just say, definitely this is required now. Although I actually think it's great to have somebody who is skilled at assessing the person they're serving and understands how to behave or how to treat the situation when,
I think, and I think
time's
Bill,
up.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we've discussed this briefly. I just think we live in a different world than 10 or 20 years ago, and we have to deal with this a little bit differently.
The risk, if it was just 5 people, if a bad event occurs, it'd be just as costly to the town. And I'm more interested, less interested in the number of people as I am the nature of the gathering
Yeah.
and what's being served. So if I was gonna make a distinction with a difference, it'd be about the nature of the gathering. You know, if it was a cheese and crackers for an art exhibit, I'm gonna not much, the risk is lower. And so, though you could say that about the numbers, but you could get 10 people together at the wrong type of event, and I'd be saying, we wanna make, but I think the most direct and certain way to deal with this, again, if there's liability risk, and they're not that expensive to get these insurance coverages for an event for folks. Now, it is true that a handful of scout leaders in an annual event with the scouts, but it's not unreasonably expensive to get the kind of insurance that you need.
So I think our immediate question tonight is whether we want to do something, is whether we want to go in this direction. If we do want to go in this direction, then somebody needs to be tasked with drawing something up for us all to take a look at. Now, I could do that because frankly, I would just take Harvard's policy and substitute Stow for Harvard and make maybe a few other changes, but not much, just for the purposes of discussion, so we can all see what it is. So I think that's our immediate question tonight. Mr. Burke.
I do not disagree with the chair's thoughts on going forward on this, and I'm all for the chair drafting up the policy. But the question of whether we should regulate the service of liquor on town property is antecedent to whether we should allow it at all.
That's a good question. That's a good point.
And the other thing I would like to ask our administrative assistant, because this is very helpful about this rider. See, I am not convinced that just allowing some other association to use town property and then serve liquor would expose the town to liability. And I understand the town administrator's concerns, but the town council did not address that precise issue, as far as I can see in that memo. But putting that aside, it would seem that I would need to know a little bit more from the MIA. Well, actually, maybe not. Maybe our administrative assistant can answer my question if the chair permits me to put it to her. So what the MIA says, look, if you want to have liquor served at town property, we'll give you a rider on your already insurance that will cover any liquor-related personal injury or property damage. Is that fair to say?
Two different things. If it's a private group, they're required to get it on their own, through maybe their own homeowners, and it's been done for showers and things like that. It's around $50 to $100. For the town, I know it sounds as if we're fully insured, but when it involves alcohol, they highly recommend that additional rider. So we're buying extra insurance because of the alcohol.
Is that additional coverage, or is it just a different additional risk?
I mean, I call it coverage because the idea is if someone drives down the road, it's additional coverage.
I mean, coverage limits.
I believe so. I haven't seen anything yet drawn
Okay.
out, but
Did you read my memo?
I'm afraid not. I'm sorry.
Oh, so I spoke to the Maya rep, and I asked a similar question. And when the town has coverage for liquor liability under its basic and its umbrella policy. But they recommend that if you're going to have a town department holding an event that liquor is being served at, they recommend buying a one-day special events policy. which costs between $100 and $300, so it's a nominal cost. Now, why would you have another policy when you have coverage? Because if the worst happens and you get a claim, having a separate policy means that your premiums on the basic and umbrella won't go up forever.
Oh, okay.
So you buy a one-day policy for $150, $200, $300 tops. If the worst happens, the worst happens. Your premiums can't go up on that because you already bought it. That's what they recommend.
And is that for town-sponsored or hosted events, or is it for, as Maureen pointed out, they won't issue any kind of coverage for non-town hosted?
They can't. The organization has to go get either a policy or a rider on an existing policy that names the town as an insured. And we'd require proof of coverage.
Yeah, we require additional insured on the actual binder.
It's a lot like we do with, when Bike for the Woods comes in here, we want to see a certificate of insurance naming and protecting that. It'd be the same thing.
And as Maureen said, we've done that, we've insisted upon that on certain social occasions. We're renting out the space to town residents for showers and things. I got no problems with that. I think, but then it comes back to the question is why did some of these, like Sudbury, just prohibit?
So I agree with you. I think a threshold vote is, do we want to allow alcohol on town property, or do we want to take the position that town council urges and that Sudbury does, and that I'm sympathetic to, which is no alcohol on town property. That's it. And I did all this work just because I'm kind of assuming that we don't want to do that. But I got to tell you, I don't think that it's worth the risk. I just don't think it's worth the risk.
What's not worth the risk?
Having alcohol on town property, not in this day and age. This kind of I see your hand. This kind of liability, this isn't theoretical stuff like a hot cup of coffee might spill in your lap. This is the kind of stuff that happens every day, especially on the weekends. People get sued because of this exact kind of stuff. And, I did a little work in this area years ago, and it scared me. And I was working for an employer then. So I do think we need a threshold vote on that question. Don?
In that regard, in so many areas of municipal management, we rely on professional legal advice. Nothing against your professions, gentlemen. We paid for our legal advice in this question. And I can't get around the basic conclusion they come back to, for this reason specified above in town council's document, we cannot recommend any policy other than one prohibiting consumption of alcohol at town-sponsored events on town property. I say we have paid for that advice. I would like an up and down vote on that, and I would, for all the reasons you mentioned. And not only that, you talk about we're in a different era. Nobody's mentioned the elephant in the room. We're talking about legal intoxicants. There's another one staring us in the face. What are we going to do when somebody comes in and say, you have allowed us in the past to serve alcohol. This year we want to serve marijuana because it's legal.
I don't know.
But my point is, if we had a policy that bans use of illegal, you don't have to ban because they're illegal, legal intoxicants on town property, that would be my preferred course of action.
Mr. Burke.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I've long since gotten beyond the point of trying to substitute my legal opinion for town council's legal opinion, even to question it. But even though we did pay for this memo, it is not clear to me that it covers all alcohol events that don't include town-hosted or town-sponsored events. And unless the chair has had conversations with our town council saying, oh no, I meant this for any kind of event held by anyone, that, I think that's not a question that we've been fully informed on.
So this has been a very helpful discussion. I'm gonna make a suggestion on how we proceed. Do you have something you wanna say?
I just have a quick question.
Yes, please.
Can anybody speculate how many of these events we might have had any given year in the past? A
Not-
handful?
Not a lot, probably less than 10.
Okay, that's,
But,
10 is 10, it's not 3.
Well, and Pompo's increased the use already. so-
yeah, and there have been some events, and I don't wanna, there was one event last year that I attended, hosted by a town department, and I had been thinking about this issue anyway, and it made me think about it more. And then in the course of some of our discussions here, we had fallen into the habit of just saying to whoever was sponsoring it, so will you keep an eye on things? Yeah, sure, I'll keep an eye on things. And I know that that's wrong. But I don't think it's so much the number. It's small, it's a small number. It's just that I know I had a sense that we were behind the times. And I think between these two things, we're confident of that. Can I make a suggestion, Tom?
Well, one of the things I was gonna say is, I think, I fully understand, and I think it's our duty to try to protect the town. I also think that I'm seeing an erosion of community spirit on certain things, all right? To have a business meeting for oars in town where they have beer and wine, no big deal, all right? A small fundraiser where they're serving beer and wine for the library. Where, for the most part, we're not talking about huge, raucous, wild things, which, we did have years ago, when we used to have 300 people at the highway department for a dance after Springfest. And, we sold $2,000 worth of beer, in a couple hours. The thing lasted for 6 hours. And, we had good rock and roll. It was a great time. But the thing is, I don't want to see us driving community-minded people that want to have a beer with their business meeting, driven out of town so that they can have a beer at their business meeting.
No. But, so you're suggesting a limitation based on, sort of like Bill was saying, size and perhaps nature.
I think Bill usually has very good advice. Whoever's incurring the liability.
Get the liability.
Need to take care of it as best we can without saying to people, you can't have a friendly get-together in town, you've got to leave because you're not going to allow it on town property.
If I can suggest, let's get John to supplement this opinion with something about non-town departments on town property. How much of this analysis applies there. And we can give him, I can contact him and give him the example of this oars thing and see if he can supplement that. And then let's set this up for another agenda where we have an up or down vote on banning alcohol on town property. And if that does not pass, then start talking in a little bit more detail about what to allow. Mr. Hawks.
Might I suggest when you chat with him that you broaden it, consistent with his town council's footnote, referring to what I just brought up? Which is, we note also that adult consumption of marijuana now lawful. A guest might lawfully bring edible marijuana products to such event. If you're gonna look at this thing, let's look at, and not say, 3 months from now, be confronted, well, gee, we never got advice on
Sure,
marijuana.
we don't want to break the bank on this whole thing, though. I can read the town administrator's thoughts. But I think, let's see if he can expand on that reasonably a little bit. Does that sound fair?
Yeah. I think one of the other things that kind of got me, I don't 100% understand it, on the advice from Maya. Specifically, town's policy contains an exclusion of liquor liability if the town is in the business of serving, which you said we're not.
Right.
However, I think we need to fully understand, I just mentioned that 20 years ago, we were having town-sponsored dances at the highway department, selling, beer and wine. No hard liquor. Does that constitute being in the business of it if the town board or group is selling it?
Selling it, yeah.
We were selling it.
Yeah,
You know,
well, that may have been a bad idea.
But the thing is,
Yeah, let's
that
not
all-
relitigate the past. We
Yeah.
were doing a lot of things we shouldn't have. And
Right.
going forward, I can just tell you simply, the way you're describing things, the liability, if you're even associated, just read the cases. Get the liability insurance. Get it for ourselves if we're gonna do it, require it of the others, or none at all. To me, it's a simple choice. Set conditions on whether you're going to do it or not, and make sure that those who create the risk insure for the risk, whether it's us or somebody else. And if you want to set a few other conditions about the size and the nature of it, but I wouldn't even necessarily do that. There's going to be alcohol, because it's not inaffordable. And here's the worst part of it. You ask somebody who's coming there, because this is the way I look at it. As a human, if I'm present and participating where alcohol is being served, leave aside the law, but the law is going to, the social risk, as you said. How do you feel if someone left that place and killed themselves, a family, or somebody else?
So, that's exactly right. I was at, well, I don't want to go into it too much, but I was at an event, and I was thinking exactly that, and I was legitimately afraid of it.
So at least let's insure everybody up.
Linda, did you
That's
want to
a
add
no-brainer.
something?
I agree.
Linda's
I
been dying
did,
to add
as
something.
a taxpayer, I would, and speaking with other people, I think they also agree with the majority thinking of the board that not the town departments and committees should not be the ones that are having the serving or providing alcohol. If it's outside groups, it's a different story in most cases, but I don't think the town board should be serving alcohol. It puts us at too much risk. And I love my drinks and my alcohol too, and I have done the serve safe for the restaurant. So, and that scares me too. So, just coming at it from all different angles, but just don't put the town at risk, is what I'm thinking with town departments or committees.
But you're suggesting, okay, so.
At least that part.
So you're
But you'd rather
suggesting-
go do the other part,
Right.
and I'm not
So-
sure I got my head around that either.
So you're suggesting a ban on town departments serving alcohol, really, I guess, anywhere, but then private, regulated, presumably with insurance and tip certification.
If they have that certification, that's up to you to decide. I mean, I'm less concerned about them doing it on town property, but there's still a concern about it. I mean,
Yeah. Okay,
I kind of agree with town council.
all right, so we have several variations here, but it's interesting, there's almost unanimity on, that we gotta do things differently, which is good. So I'm glad we had this discussion. Mr. Burke, last word.
And it will be just a word or two, which is, look, I don't disagree with our Madam Town Clerk. I think there's a lot of prudence in what she's advising. On the other hand, it's going to be a big change to town culture.
Yeah, but,
Wait a minute, let me just finish.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's wrong. The only reason I mention it is because I would hope between now and when we take this up again, we get a lot more thoughts from everyone in town about their ideas on whether we should allow it for town departments, not for town departments, whether people want to have the opportunity or the option to have alcohol at non-town hosted events. Those are that's all I was going to say. I haven't made up my mind either way, but I'd like to hear other people.
Oh, I think one of the things that we may want to do is once we get, I'll call it a draft version of what we're thinking, maybe we have a public hearing. of some
Forum.
sort.
It's called a forum.
I think a
Public
meeting,
Yeah.
well,
Public forum.
yeah, I don't know.
I have mixed emotions on that, Mr. Chairman, just because
It's
you
not that
can't-
big of a deal.
This is not direct democracy where you can push a button in every household in town and say, this is what ought to be done and count the votes. We're elected to make decisions. We
Right.
don't make a lot of them. This is one of them.
Yeah,
That
I-
has some
I kinda-
implication, and I think we need to be prepared to step up and vote our consciences.
Right, and ultimately, it's about liability,
Mhm.
and I don't think I need a public forum to inform me about liability. I think we obviously have all these discussions at a public meeting. So, anyway, okay, so I'm taking as instruction that I'm going to follow with town council, try to get a little bit more of a better answer on private entities on town land, and I will start drafting something, but as a practical matter, this isn't going to come up again until after town meeting. Courtney, I'm sorry, did you have something else?
My thought is, as a first step, to have insurance is pretty logical. Not to have it is, that we don't have it kind
Yeah.
of amazes me, so
The,
getting that liability.
Yes, town council's point is, insurance is great, it gives you a pocket to pay liability out of. How about talking about no liability? That's his
Mhm.
I
point.
get it.
Okay, this was a good discussion.
And I'll read your memo dated June 11th before that next meeting.
Okay. It was in the packet, wasn't it?
It may have been, but perhaps I just missed it.
That's okay. All right, thank you for that. Town administrator's report.
So, something that's not in writing, that came late to me through a call with John and Barbara, is that they have agreed in principle to merge with KP Law, merge their law practice, effective July 1. And in fact, they will come here at our next meeting, just to fill folks in on it. Essentially, though, based on promises made and accepted, they remain the individuals working on our account. Our hourly rate remains the same. And so, and even the billing, because I've got a rather unique and probably nauseating billing process with too much detail. John even promised me that that would remain on it, so.
Does that survive your departure?
Huh?
I don't know how.
He didn't make any promises of that.
Okay.
But, I mean, the major ones are there. Obviously, a rate increase at some point would be, they're not getting overpaid by comparison. So I just want to let you know that they'll be in to chat. So I'm fully willing to accept them being part of KP Law. Now, KP Law is a large, used to be Copeland and Page, it's now KP. There was a restructuring there a little while ago. So they're a full-range law firm. They offer services. I think they're now serving over 100 communities in Massachusetts. There's no specialty in law that they don't have the assets for. So that's a force multiplier for us, and we get to keep our folks working on our accounts at our rate for the time being. So
And they'll know all the people that they're suing in other towns.
That could be that too. The other thing was just a update to let you know that the board had been apprised of the fact that we had gotten a response from HSH, which was the same response we've always got. And at this point, it's rather moot because what they were offering was to provide gratis engineering services that we've now paid for in any event. So John and I talked, and my feeling was that he should now go forward with the filings, given that nothing's changed, without having to meet with either the planning board or the board of selectmen on that, and there was no response, thinking that they should, so I just want to let you know he's underway on that. The Lowell Village Working Group, it was just a summary of what you basically heard tonight. I'll be looking at the takeoff numbers and the detail that just came in this afternoon to compare to the earlier ones myself. I think Sue is a great asset technically. She is deeply involved. She's in the process now. I approved for Jesse to have her do a full plan and spec peer review, and it's underway. We'll have it in a few days, so certainly before the forum. And we'll know the actual number. What I'm doing and what perhaps will help you folks is look at the nature of the scope of the work that's being proposed. And if you go back and look at the sequencing of it from the beginning, you'll get a better sense of, and some of it's repeated, and it's technical, and Green mentions it, it's replete throughout there. What wasn't done for engineering, what should have been done, what was misengineered, you'll get a better sense of real. So if you end up being persuaded that this is the proper scope of work, and unless you have reviewing the plans and specs as an engineer find a fatal flaw, which I'm going to rely on the two engineers we have, I worked for one, then the price is going to be what ET&L says it is, and that's what the cost of doing this work. So if you approve the scope of the work, I'm not saying you do, but it's understandable what they're saying when you read it. You know what they're doing, right? If that's something you believe is basic and fundamental to the long-term servicing of this project, and ET&L gives you the price that they're saying is the GC they're going to do it for, you have a choice to make.
I understood the scope of work as laid out in Green's first document, the April whatever. But that was at a different price level than we're at now. Not much different, but $300,000-$400,000 less.
Oh, that's substantial. And the big part of that, by the way, is the retention when you go in and look at it.
Yeah.
Which they're talking about. So I'm saying when you get so that they should be prepared to explain the nature and extent of the retention issue, because it's a substantive figure in there. And so when you ask those questions, if you're comfortable, and then Sue began to give you a sense of the purpose of the retention, the size of it, drainage calcs are required by statute, and Mass DOT benchmarks are required, so this is going to be built to spec. And if it is, there's a price tag to it that wasn't there because the previous engineer didn't price that up because it wasn't to spec, wasn't to standard. And some of the other things, again, as you go through it, you'll see, and when you look at the takeoff numbers, you can see much of that here. Now, the ones that you don't understand, you simply ask to say, how much granite, and go through with that. But the peer review for me will be the closure. And if it's solid and valid from her perspective, then at this point, no one else is in a position. So we got a new engineer, got two on the committee. If they're supportive of it, my general understanding of the scope and engineering, and ET&L, more importantly, has been involved in this process up front, so that they're involved in saying, look, we're on the ground, we do this. We didn't find out that they didn't like what was partially engineered before and it wouldn't work. Now, they're all in, they agree on the approach, we're going to get a price. So then, do you want to spend that money to do that work? Because that's what we got, or don't you? So I think that's the way to approach it. That's how I'm going to approach it, in any event.
All right.
I don't know did I have anything else? Nothing that was worth remarking on, I'm sure. Moving forward with got my working group together with regard to the Collins Institute, UMass Boston Policy for Management. I met with Mary, by the way, and she's
Getting to see her. It's been 1 year.
So she'll be out here several times, and I'll let you guys know.
You'll let me know next time
Yep.
she's here. I'll come in 15 minutes ahead of time.
And then going forward with the working group who will facilitate the interaction, and there'll be a conduit to all the employees so that they're fully engaged, and we're going step by step incrementally. And then at the back end of it, I'm thinking about wanting to create I'm gonna call it a personnel board. That there was one we had in town before I got here, and they had done their last work before and then it was pretty much dissolved, and I've forgotten why. But we haven't, but personnel issues, and I'm thinking about my successor, because anybody that's in this business at a level of responsibility for management with personnel, it's a bear. Laws are changing, regs are changing. Massachusetts just passed under a Leave Act. They doubled to 26 weeks, and
Subject to town acceptance.
right, but I'm just saying, these things are changing all the time. And discipline, the bylaws, and so I don't know the nature of it, but I want to get a group. And their first act will be to take the results of this study and decide what's the best and wisest way to use it. Is it a final product? Is it a working document? Can we expand on it? Are there things that weren't necessarily, because we're buying time. You're not getting everything answered here. You're going to get benchmarks. You know, if the comparables are that valid comparables, we're going to get things that will allow us to make some decisions. But again, I'm not certain me alone should be making those decisions, or the person that holds this. This is, you know, a town-wide thing, and so that working group, maybe I create an official board with your blessing, or you create it, or I create something interim as a working group, but that's gonna have a group of people looking at personnel issues, including the findings here. That's, I think, would be important, so that these findings get taken by the town of Stow, and not alone based on the consultants, because I've seen a lot of these, and I participated in them. There are gaps, there are misinterpretations or different interpretations or emphasis in different areas, and this is talking about people's salaries and our staffing, which is important. So when I outline something on that other part, I'll give it to you, but I'd like that to be a task that the results of this study and the findings be taken on by this group to say, okay, here's what we think ought to happen, you know, with staffing and salaries and such. My thought, anyway. And it gives the replacement coming in, you know, at least some support that's already started with regard to personnel issues. You can then decide, the town, whether to reconstruct that support, in what fashion, you know, an assistant town administrator for personnel. There's a lot of that going on. I predict it will be difficult to find, if you look at the charter and what my job description is, chief this, chief that, chief that, most people in my business are now getting that support.
Right.
And it's generally in personnel and or procurement as an assistant, not sharing administrative assistants or something. It's getting some assignment, maybe part-time or not. I'm not saying that's where you go, but at least we've got something in place helping along with personnel, and that being the first big issue. It would buy some time for the town and for the person and the board to decide what the hell they want to do longer term. Just my thoughts. But anyway, we're going forward.
Okay. Questions?
And that's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is the last meeting, obviously, before. Are we going to have a special meeting in advance on the 24th?
So I was going to get to that.
Okay, but I just didn't know whether there was anything more that we needed to discuss on this issue now. I'm
On personnel, no.
no, on the Lower Village.
Yeah, there's a ton, but it's not on the agenda. So we're going to have a meeting. Well, it's not on the agenda, plus we don't have the benefit of the peer review or the public forum, so we're going to have a meeting. I want to say 6:15 or 6:30, if we can figure it out, before town meeting.
Suggest
6:15
would be better, so it isn't so cramped.
So one thing that will be important is that peer review be in writing. So again, and with enough specificity so that you can look at it. If you take all the other materials leading up to it and the cost estimates and ask the questions that you have of it at the forum, because it's going to be a few days before town meeting if there's any that can't be answered. But bring them up, you know? And there's nothing that prevents you from emailing the working group anytime you want to, you know? I mean, we have a responsibility, if we're going to raise questions, to get them to people in time so that they can prepare to answer them. I'm sending questions all the damn time, you know? And so I encourage you to do the same thing. If you've got questions, they're receptive to it. It's a working group. Email them off, you know? I mean, I share with you what I get from them when I get it. And,
I need an overview. I need what I asked for tonight. I need an overview of what we're spending the money on. I get these vague memos that don't have dollars attached to individual items, that don't explain why this didn't come up earlier. I need the overview that I asked.
so what I would say is send an email directly to them with specificity as how you identify and define that deliverable. What are you looking for? So I would take the previous reports that you've read, the cost estimates that may not give you the answers you want, say, okay, I want this tied out to the following. Because the reports, I think, as I've read them, I understand what we're getting. And so if you don't, then the format and the content obviously isn't, as you read these things, is not giving you the sense that I have, but we're in different places. So I would put in writing to that committee.
I mean, I can't take, I don't even know what cost estimates you're talking about other than the green one, which was very helpful, except after you got beyond the basics, then you get into options we didn't know what they were going to pick. I need an explanation of what the dollars are for.
Yeah, and that's a general statement, so break that down. What does that mean exactly? So somehow, you've got to put for them in terms, because I think they think they're giving some of that, and I think they are. But if it's not coming through, and for different people, that's a different definition, you know, because like I said, now I'm in a different place. I've done this for a long time. I can understand it. But if you can't, and you're on the board of selectmen, send them and say, for example, I read the following. It said this. I'm not sure what that means, and how does it tie to the cost estimate? Because I can tie those out by looking at these numbers. I know where it's going, but you can't. But you gotta, I think, be helpful by telling them, look, I know you've said this, but I'm not getting it yet. Here's what I really need to do. That scope of item tied to a price, and it gives us what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So what you're saying, Jim, is you want to see that for reconfiguring White Pond Road, it's X number of dollars?
No.
No.
Let's say the total, not even, wait, yes.
You want to see the individual pieces?
I want like
so
a
that it
two-page
adds up?
document.
Yeah.
The total we're asking for town meeting is X dollars.
Mhm.
Of that, Y is for this, made necessary by blah, 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 blah. Z is for this, made necessary by blah, 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 blah. That's what I want. As opposed to just, well, this is X percent of.
680 tons of.
So I think if you go back to that first written narrative that Green provided, I thought he gave you that.
He did, but through like 60% of it, and then the rest of it is about options, and I don't know what options.
Yeah, so he got to 890, and now
Yes.
we're at, and what I'll give you the price, that a significant difference from there to where they are now is one thing, which is that retention pond, and a couple other items.
So that's a good point. I could say to them, that's a very good point. I could say to them, I understand the part of the green report that's up to 890, and I assume that that's what we're doing. I don't understand how we get to X. Could you break that down? That's kind of what I was asking for. So,
Yeah, just-
okay, fine, that's what I did.
And just send it to them.
Okay.
Because they'll know what that,
That's fine, that's good. Okay,
Have a
thank you.
safe trip back.
So I think we can excuse the town administrator, go back to the front. I'm going through a bike ride Saturday, going through Orange.
Yeah?
Yeah, look for me.
So it's Castle Rock now because they're filming, so.
Yes, of
when you go
course.
through there, be careful.
Okay.
Nobody's gonna,
So
Don't-
all we,
and please don't mention my name.
I will carry a sign.
Selectman.
He'll stop in at the police station and ask for you.
So I have to be honest, I don't feel like I have the energy to have an in-depth discussion of Selectmen's liaison assignments. However,
That's why I came.
yes, because that's what you
Well,
exist for.
I don't,
Well, I am mostly concerned about Courtney
Yeah.
being the newest person. And Courtney, can you tell me what you need? Ingeborg basically had
I know
number
what
one.
she had, and I'm willing to start by
Liaising with them.
liaising with the people.
Okay. Maureen, SMOT should be up on committee memberships, because she's
Okay.
actually a committee member of that.
Okay.
For a fixed term?
And for whatever term, I don't know. I don't know there is a term. Do you need something from us?
That brings up a point, because if it's a committee member, do we have to appoint her then?
Yes, we do.
We appoint these other ones.
Right.
Yeah.
If we're gonna substitute her name for Ingeborg and Ollie's, we're gonna have to have a vote. But I want to ask a question. Do you need something? So emails back and forth, panicked emails about the town hall, building reuse. Do you need something there, and also for community preservation? Is there something, I'm unclear what's going on there.
So because I am now a selectman, I can no longer be the Conservation Commission's representative to the Community Preservation Committee.
Really? Well, are you gonna stay on the Conservation Commission?
I am remaining on Conservation Commission, but my understanding is that the Community Preservation Committee does not have a member who is a selectman. They have members who, they have a liaison from the selectman. But as a selectman, that I can no longer be a member of the Community Preservation Committee.
I don't know why that would be.
There was something about what the,
I think
when they
it's
set up the
way it's
membership.
written. Yeah. I think it's-
You already have a different Concom member on there, right?
They're taking it under consideration, who the next
Right.
member will be.
So I'm not sure what there is about your being a selectman. There's no selectman seat. So you couldn't be there as a selectman. But you are a Conservation Commission member, and there is a Conservation Commission seat. I don't know what there is about being a selectman that bars you from being
Well,
on there.
I'll read the act
Yeah.
again before we.
In fact, what I was kind of thinking and hoping, well, not hoping, but if you remained on it, you could be our liaison.
Which I'm fine with.
Because there's no,
Although I
there's
might
no
want to trade you
selectman.
for
Yes,
recreation committee or
yes.
something
There's,
like that then.
there's no selectman on the Conservation Commission, but you're gonna be on that. You just happen to be a selectman. I don't know why.
my
There was something
predecessor.
about the statute and the discussion of, with the community preservation.
Okay,
Yeah, I think so.
okay, could we try to nail that down?
We will, yeah.
It was in their email.
I didn't see anything of.
Well, let's dig in, I'll look at the act and our bylaw about the membership and
Okay,
see.
yeah, the email asserted that it was somebody's impression that a selectman couldn't be on, but I couldn't understand it. Brian, did you have something you
No, I
wanted?
was just gonna say, have you taken the coordinated, or have you taken the online conflict of interest training yet?
Let's try to stay on topic.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe it'll answer there too. That's all I was gonna
don't
say.
think so, but, so, what else do you need?
So, I'm trying to remember how we were gonna make this work otherwise. It could be possible that, I can't remember how it would work,
Okay.
I apologize.
So, for now, can we just vote to substitute your name for Ingeborg's in 3 places: Conservation Commission, Recreation, and SPOT?
Yes.
Okay.
Except I would, if I'm going to be liaison in future to the CPC, I would like to perhaps trade you or somebody else for recreation.
So this is without prejudice to making future changes? This is for now,
That's
while
fine.
we figure that out?
Yep.
Okay. So, and I actually was going to suggest we do 2 votes. One, making Courtney the liaison to Rec Commission and Conservation Commission, and then one making her a member of SMOT, the Selectmen's representative on SMOT. So can I have a motion on that first thing?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Courtney as a voting member of SMOT.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded to make Courtney Fresh a voting member of SMOT, the Selectmen's representative on SMOT. Further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And now do I have another motion making her the liaisons to Recreation Commission and Conservation Commission, I'm sorry, Conservation and Open Space, without prejudice to further change?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded to make Courtney the liaisons to Conservation and Open Space and Recreation without prejudice to further change. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Maureen, I was gonna suggest Randall Library Building Committee, I think is kaput.
Okay.
There might be another one, I'm not so sure I'm gonna wanna be on it. But if there is gonna be one, we'll deal with it when it's formed. That one, if it's the one about the restoration, it hardly ever met anyway. I can't remember that. It met like 4 times. So we should just take that off.
Okay.
And like I said, we should move SMOT up to committee memberships.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have any, we can always make other changes.
I'm fine where I am.
I'm fine where I am.
Can we have a motion to reappoint? Is it time to do reappointments?
We're doing them at the next meeting, I'm
Do-
not sure.
So we're going to reappoint, because my term on capital planning is expiring. Don's term as magic is expiring.
I think that's on the next agenda.
That's on the next?
I believe so.
Are you,
Excellent.
did you say you're gonna be away next meeting?
I'll be here.
You?
Yeah, I'll be
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I thought I saw you were gonna be away at 20, I'm sorry. Oh, that was
Okay.
May, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's set for now. Anybody, real quick liaison assignments? Anybody want to talk about anything they're doing?
Liaison assignments or reports?
Reports, sorry.
No, nothing that can wait, although I do think Don should be able to justify why he continues on Tri-Town liaison.
In case they ever call another meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Adjourn.
In
Excellent.
case they ever call.